The F-35 Lightning II sat motionless on the tarmac at Ramstein Air Base, its sleek composite skin gleaming under the harsh German morning sun. What should have been another routine pre-flight inspection had turned into something that defied every protocol manual ever written. The aircraft's advanced avionics system, designed with layers of biometric security that could identify authorized pilots through retinal scans, voice patterns, and even heartbeat signatures, had done something unprecedented. It had unlocked itself for someone who wasn't supposed to fly. Major Catalina Nightingale Reyes stood 3 feet from the cockpit ladder, her medical corps insignia catching the light as she stared at the open canopy. The jet's engines hummed with a low, almost purring sound that seasoned pilots knew meant the aircraft was primed and ready. But Catalina wasn't a pilot, at least, not according to her current assignment. She was a flight surgeon, a trauma nurse who'd spent the last 18 months patching up the broken bodies that came back from missions she'd never been cleared to fly. "Control, this is Ground Crew 7, crackled the radio from Senior Airman Rodriguez, his voice tight with confusion. "We've got a situation at Hangar 12. The Lightning just activated itself. No pilot input, no maintenance override. It's like the damn thing is waiting for someone." The base's Flight Operations Center fell silent. In the control tower, Colonel Marcus Webb lowered his coffee cup, his weathered face creasing into deep lines of concern. 30 years of military aviation had taught him that jets didn't just decide to wake up on their own. The F-35's lockout system was foolproof, had been tested against every conceivable scenario, every possible hack or malfunction. Yet here it was, defying logic with the casual indifference of a machine that had made its own decision. Catalina approached the aircraft slowly, her combat boots silent against the concrete. The morning air carried the familiar scent of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid, smells that had become as comforting to her as antiseptic and gauze once were. She'd spent countless hours in hangars like this, treating pilots who came back shattered from missions, their bodies broken but their spirits somehow still intact. She'd learned their language, their fears, their dreams of sky and speed, and the terrible beauty of combat. The jet's cockpit displays flickered to life as she drew closer, bathing her face in soft blue light. Somewhere in the base's secure communications room, encrypted channels began buzzing with urgent chatter. Something was happening that no one understood, and at the center of it all stood a woman whose hands had saved more lives than most combat pilots had ever seen, yet who wasn't supposed to know the first thing about flying a $50 million killing machine. But the Lightning II seemed to disagree. 3 hours earlier, Catalina had been reviewing medical reports in her cramped office when the base-wide alert system had activated. Not the usual drill. This was different. The coded message that flashed across her computer screen made her blood run cold. Operation Blackout. Enemy forces had compromised satellite communications across the European theater. Every NATO base from Turkey to Norway was operating under radio silence, their sophisticated command networks reduced to whispers in the electromagnetic spectrum. The briefing room had filled with the base's senior officers, their faces grim as intelligence reports painted an increasingly dire picture. Russian forces had pushed deeper into Ukrainian territory than anyone had anticipated, and now they were probing NATO's eastern borders with electronic warfare capabilities that seemed almost supernatural in their precision. Every Allied aircraft in the region was grounded pending security sweeps, except for a single squadron of F-35s equipped with experimental quantum-encrypted communication systems. Lieutenant Colonel James "Hawk" Morrison had been scheduled to lead the reconnaissance mission, his weathered hands steady as he'd reviewed the flight plan. But 20 minutes before takeoff, Morrison had collapsed in the ready room, clutching his chest as cardiac arrest claimed another warrior before his time. His wingman, Captain Davies, had been in the infirmary with food poisoning. The remaining pilots were either on leave or assigned to other critical missions. "We need someone in the air in 15 minutes, Colonel Webb had announced, his voice carrying the weight of impossible decisions. Intel suggests the Russians are planning something big and were flying blind without reconnaissance. That's when Catalina had done something that surprised everyone, including herself. She'd stood up from her position along the back wall, where medical personnel usually observed briefings without speaking. "Sir, I have flight certification," she'd said quietly, her voice cutting through the room's tense atmosphere like a scalpel through flesh. The silence that followed was deafening. 23 pairs of eyes had turned toward her, some curious, others openly skeptical. Catalina Reyes, the base's chief flight surgeon, the woman who'd earned her nickname Nightingale by bringing dying pilots back from the edge, she was claiming she could fly their most advanced fighter jet. Webb's eyebrows had risen almost to his hairline. "Medical officers don't fly combat missions, Major. It's not how things work." "With respect, sir," Catalina had replied, her dark eyes steady, "today nothing is working the way it's supposed to." Now standing beside the mysteriously activated F-35, she wondered if the universe was trying to tell her something. The aircraft's systems continued their soft electronic symphony, displays cycling through pre-flight checks that should have required pilot input. But somehow, the jet knew she was there. Somehow, it was preparing itself for her. The truth about Catalina's flight certification was more complex than she'd let on in the briefing room. Before medical school, before her commission as a flight surgeon, she'd been something else entirely. Fresh out of flight school at 22, she'd been one of the Air Force's most promising young pilots. Her scores had been exceptional, her instincts sharp, her dedication absolute. She'd been weeks away from her first combat deployment when the accident happened. It had been a training flight over the Nevada desert, nothing more dangerous than basic formation flying with two other rookie pilots. But mechanical failures don't care about experience levels or safety protocols. When her F-16's engine had seized at 30,000 feet, Catalina had managed to dead-stick the aircraft to a rough landing in the desert, saving not only her own life, but preventing the jet from crashing into a populated area. The Air Force had called her a hero. The medical board had called her unfit for flight duty. The crash had shattered 3 vertebrae and damaged her left shoulder in ways that would never fully heal. More importantly, it had triggered a rare inner ear condition that made high-G maneuvers potentially fatal. Her dreams of aerial combat had ended in a hospital bed, replaced by a different kind of service, one that involved healing rather than fighting, saving lives rather than taking them. But she'd never stopped studying, never stopped learning about aircraft systems and combat tactics. During her recovery, she'd immersed herself in flight manuals and tactical doctrine, convincing herself that knowledge could somehow replace the ability to fly. Her medical training had given her an understanding of human physiology under extreme stress that most pilots never developed, and her engineering background had helped her grasp the technical complexities of modern fighter aircraft in ways that surprised even her instructors. The F-35's cockpit beckoned, its flight controls seeming to adjust themselves for her arrival. Catalina knew that what she was contemplating went against every regulation in the book, but she also knew that sometimes, when the world was falling apart, the book became irrelevant. Behind her, she could hear approaching footsteps, probably Colonel Webb coming to personally escort her away from the aircraft. The smart move would be to step back, return to her medical duties, and let someone else solve the crisis. The smart move would be to admit that Nurse wasn't supposed to fly, no matter what the jet's computers seemed to think. But Catalina had stopped making smart moves the day she'd chosen to become a flight surgeon, instead of a bitter ex-pilot. Colonel Webb's voice carried across the hangar with the authority of 3 decades in uniform. "Major Reyes, step away from the aircraft immediately. I don't know what kind of malfunction we're dealing with, but—" His words died as the F-35's engines spooled up to idle power, their whine echoing off the hangar walls like a mechanical prayer. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, the voice of a machine that had decided its own fate. Every person in the hangar froze, their arguments and protocols forgotten in the face of something that defied explanation. Catalina turned to face Webb, her expression calm despite the chaos swirling around them. "Sir, with respect, this isn't a malfunction. The aircraft is responding to biometric data that it recognizes. My pilot certification may be inactive, but it's still in the system. The jet knows I can fly it." "Your medical condition," Webb began, but Catalina cut him off with a gentle shake of her head. "My condition affects high-G maneuvers, not basic flight operations. And sir, we both know that this reconnaissance mission isn't going to involve aerobatics. It's about getting eyes on target and bringing intelligence home." She paused, her voice softening. "Besides, what's the alternative? Ground the entire operation while Russian forces do whatever they're planning?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Around the hangar, crew members had stopped their work to watch the confrontation, their faces reflecting the same uncertainty that plagued their commanding officer. In the distance, air raid sirens began their mournful wail, not a drill, but an acknowledgement that the world had become a more dangerous place in the last few hours. Staff Sergeant Martinez approached Webb with a tablet displaying real-time intelligence updates. His face was pale as he handed over the device. "Sir, we're getting reports of massive troop movements along the Polish border. If we don't get reconnaissance data in the next hour—" Webb's jaw tightened as he scanned the information. Every fiber of his military training screamed against allowing a medical officer to fly a combat mission. But every instinct he'd developed as a leader told him that conventional wisdom might not apply to unconventional circumstances. He looked at Catalina for a long moment, studying the woman who'd earned her nickname by refusing to let wounded pilots die on her operating table. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her eyes focused with the kind of intensity he'd seen in his best combat pilots. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to Major Ray's than anyone had realized. The F-35 continued its patient vigil, waiting for a decision that would either validate or destroy everything its advanced computers thought they knew about the woman standing beside it. "Major," Webb said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of command, "if you're wrong about this, if something happens to you or that aircraft—" "Then you'll have one less flight surgeon and one less F-35, Catalina replied simply. "But if I'm right, we'll have intelligence that could save thousands of lives." She gestured toward the jet, which seemed to purr with mechanical satisfaction. "Besides, sir, I think the decision has already been made. The question is whether we're going to trust a $50 million computer or our own fears." Webb closed his eyes for a moment, running through scenarios that all seemed to end in career-ending disasters or strategic victories. When he opened them again, his expression had changed. The uncertainty was still there, but it was balanced now by something else, the kind of desperate resolve that had won wars throughout history. "Get her suited up," he ordered, his voice carrying across the hangar with renewed authority. "And someone get me a direct line to Strategic Command. If we're going to break every rule in the book, I want them to know exactly why." As the ground crew scrambled to prepare for an impossible mission, Catalina felt something she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't quite hope, and it certainly wasn't confidence. It was something simpler and more profound, the sense that she was finally in the right place at the right time, even if that place happened to be the cockpit of an aircraft she wasn't supposed to know how to fly. The sky above Ramstein had turned the color of old steel, heavy with clouds that promised either rain or revelation. Soon, she would be part of that sky again, carrying the hopes and fears of everyone who'd watched her improbable transformation from healer to warrior. The F-35 waited with mechanical patience, its systems humming with the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle finally solved. But first, she had to prove that sometimes the most unlikely person for a job was exactly the right person after all. 20 minutes later, Catalina sat in the F-35's cockpit, surrounded by displays that would have overwhelmed most pilots but somehow felt familiar to her physician's eye. The helmet was heavier than she'd expected, its advanced visor systems painting the world in layers of augmented data that reminded her of the medical imaging equipment she used to diagnose complex injuries. Her hands found the controls with muscle memory she didn't know she possessed, fingers dancing across switches and buttons with the fluid grace of a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. "Nightingale, this is Tower," Webb's voice crackled through her headset, using her medical call sign with what might have been irony or respect. "Systems show green across the board. How are you feeling up there?" Catalina ran through the final pre-flight checklist, her eyes scanning instruments that displayed everything from engine temperature to threat detection algorithms. The jet felt alive beneath her, its fly-by-wire systems responding to her thoughts as much as her touch. "Tower, Nightingale, all systems nominal. It's like riding a bicycle, if bicycles cost $50 million and could break the sound barrier." A brief chuckle echoed through the comm channel, followed by the more serious voice of Major Patricia Santos from the intelligence section. "Nightingale, be advised we're showing increased electronic activity along your planned route. Stay sharp out there." The F-35's canopy lowered with a mechanical whisper, sealing Catalina into her technological cocoon. Outside, ground crew members gave her thumbs-up signals as they cleared the area around her aircraft. The moment felt surreal, like stepping into a dream that someone else had been having for years. But as the jet's engines responded to her throttle input, as the machine began its slow taxi toward the runway, reality asserted itself with the subtle violence of acceleration and the promise of altitude. "Tower, Nightingale requesting clearance for takeoff," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Nightingale, you are cleared for takeoff. Weather shows clear skies at altitude, winds calm, and Major." Webb's voice paused, carrying weight that transcended radio protocol. "Bring yourself home safe. That's an order." Catalina aligned the F-35 with the runway centerline, feeling the aircraft systems integrate her inputs with computer-controlled precision. The jet wanted to fly. She could sense its eagerness in the way the engines responded, in the way the control surfaces adjusted themselves for optimal performance. As she pushed the throttles forward, as the Lightning II began its acceleration down the concrete strip, she understood that she was no longer just a medical officer borrowing a fighter jet. She was a pilot again, carrying the weight of a mission that could change everything. The F-35 lifted off with the grace of a bird that had never doubted its ability to fly, carrying Catalina into a sky that had been waiting years for her return. At 28,000 feet, the world below looked like a tactical map spread across a briefing room table. Catalina had been airborne for 43 minutes, and the F-35's advanced sensors were already painting a disturbing picture of the situation developing along NATO's eastern borders. Her displays showed movement patterns that didn't match any known Russian doctrine, vehicle formations that seemed too precise, too coordinated, too advanced for conventional forces. "Control, Nightingale," she transmitted, her voice professional despite the growing unease in her chest. "I'm seeing armor concentrations approximately 15 kilometers east of the Polish border. Estimate 200-plus vehicles, but the thermal signatures are unusual." Back at Ramstein, Colonel Webb leaned forward in his chair, studying the real-time data streaming from Catalina's aircraft. "Define unusual, Nightingale." Catalina adjusted her sensor array, zooming in on the formations below. What she saw made her medical training and pilot instincts converge in a moment of terrible clarity. "Sir, these aren't standard tank formations. The heat signatures suggest advanced reactive armor, possibly electromagnetic shielding, and they're moving in patterns that suggest AI-assisted coordination." The intelligence implications hit the control room like a physical force. If the Russians had deployed autonomous armored units along NATO borders, it represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power. Major Santos grabbed her secure phone, already dialing strategic command as Webb continued his conversation with the woman who wasn't supposed to be flying their most advanced reconnaissance aircraft. "Nightingale, can you get closer? We need detailed imagery." Catalina felt the F-35 respond to her thoughts as much as her controls, the jet's stealth characteristics allowing her to penetrate deeper into contested airspace than any conventional aircraft could manage. But as she descended to 22,000 feet, her threat warning system began painting amber cautions across her displays. Someone down there knew she was coming. "Control, I'm getting painted by search radar. Multiple sources, frequencies suggest S-400 surface-to-air systems." Her hands moved instinctively across the cockpit controls, activating electronic countermeasures that would make her aircraft harder to track. Continuing approach. Webb's voice carried new tension. "Nightingale, if they acquire a firing solution." "They won't," Catalina interrupted, her confidence surprising even herself. The F-35 stealth technology was specifically designed to defeat the kind of radar system she was facing, and her approach angle minimized her radar cross-section even further. But more than that, she felt connected to the aircraft in ways that transcended technical specifications. The jet seemed to anticipate threats before her instruments could detect them, adjusting its flight path with subtle corrections that kept them invisible to hostile sensors. As she reached her target area, Catalina's displays filled with intelligence data that would reshape NATO's understanding of Russian capabilities. The armored formations weren't just advanced, they were revolutionary. Unmanned tanks moved in perfect coordination with aerial drones, their weapon systems locked onto predetermined targets with precision that suggested real-time satellite guidance. This wasn't preparation for a conventional invasion. It was a demonstration of technological superiority that could render traditional defensive strategies obsolete. "Control, Nightingale. I need to get closer. The imagery we're collecting is good, but we need definitive proof of what we're seeing." Webb's response came after a long pause. "Negative, Nightingale. You've got what we need. Return to base immediately." But even as he spoke, Catalina was already adjusting her approach. Something in the formation patterns below had caught her attention, a gap in the defensive arrangement that seemed almost deliberate. Her medical training had taught her to recognize patterns that others might miss, anomalies that could indicate underlying pathology. What she was seeing below looked like a trap, but it also looked like an opportunity. "Control, there's something else. I'm detecting what appears to be a command vehicle, isolated from the main formation. If I can get imagery of their control systems." The silence from Ramstein stretched for nearly 10 seconds, an eternity in military communications. Finally, Webb's voice returned, heavy with the weight of command decisions that could determine the fate of nations. "Nightingale, you have 5 minutes. Get your pictures and get out." Catalina pushed the F-35 into a shallow dive, her aircraft invisible to the sensors below, but her heart racing with the knowledge that she was about to attempt something that could either provide crucial intelligence or start a global conflict. The jet responded to her commands with the precision of a surgical instrument, carrying her deeper into hostile territory and closer to answers that might explain why a nurse had been chosen to fly a mission that could change everything. Below her, the future of warfare waited in formations of steel and silicon, unaware that their secrets were being observed by someone who understood both the fragility of human life and the terrible beauty of the machines designed to end it. The command vehicle sat in a clearing like a technological altar, its angular surfaces bristling with communication arrays and sensor equipment that seemed almost alien in their sophistication. Catalina's targeting pod locked onto the vehicle from 8 miles away, its high-resolution cameras capturing details that made her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't just advanced Russian military technology. This was something that pushed the boundaries of what she'd thought possible. Control Nightingale, target acquired, beginning detailed reconnaissance run. As the F-35 sensors analyzed the command vehicle, Catalina found herself drawing on knowledge that had nothing to do with her pilot training. Her medical background had given her an understanding of human physiology that translated unexpectedly well to threat assessment. She could read the patterns of personnel movement around the vehicle, could interpret the stress indicators in their body language, could sense the tension that meant something significant was about to happen. Nightingale were showing increased radio chatter in your area, Major Santos transmitted from Ramstein. Multiple frequencies, encrypted channels. Whatever you're looking at, they're talking about it. Catalina adjusted her approach angle, bringing the F-35's cameras to bear on the command vehicle's most sensitive areas. What she saw through the targeting pod made her medical training and pilot instincts scream simultaneous warnings. The vehicle wasn't just a command center. It was a mobile laboratory, complete with biohazard containment systems and medical equipment that looked disturbingly familiar. Control, this is Nightingale. I'm seeing medical equipment integrated with military command systems. This doesn't look like conventional warfare preparation. Her voice carried the professional calm she'd learned during years of delivering life-and-death diagnoses, but underneath lay a growing sense of urgency that had nothing to do with enemy radar locks or surface-to-air missiles. Webb's response came immediately. Clarify medical equipment, Nightingale. Sir, I'm looking at what appears to be biological containment systems, possibly for weapons-grade materials. The configuration suggests they're not just planning conventional military operations. She paused, her trained eye catching details that would have been meaningless to most pilots. Colonel, I think we're looking at preparation for biological warfare. The silence from Ramstein Control stretched across the secure channel like a held breath. In the intelligence section, Major Santos was already coordinating with biodefense specialists, her fingers flying across encrypted keyboards as she transmitted preliminary findings to Strategic Command. The implications of what Catalina was reporting could reshape NATO's entire defensive posture in a matter of hours. But as the F-35 completed its reconnaissance pass, something unexpected happened. The command vehicle's personnel stopped their activities and looked up, their faces turning toward the sky with expressions of recognition rather than surprise. They knew she was there. More than that, they seemed to have been waiting for her. Control, I think I've been made, Catalina transmitted, her hands already moving to initiate evasive maneuvers. But before she could change course, her threat warning system exploded with new contacts, not surface-to-air missiles, but aircraft. Fast-moving, stealthy aircraft that had somehow appeared on her sensors without warning. Nightingale, we show multiple bogies converging on your position. Whatever you do, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Through her canopy, Catalina caught her first visual glimpse of the aircraft pursuing her. They looked like nothing in any NATO or Russian inventory, sleek, angular shapes that seemed to bend light around their surfaces. But what made her blood run cold wasn't their alien appearance, it was their flight characteristics. They moved with coordination that suggested artificial intelligence, their formations perfect, their responses to her evasive maneuvers predictable in ways that meant they were reading her intentions before she could act on them. The F-35's defensive systems activated automatically, chaff and flare dispensers cycling as the jet's computers tried to defeat incoming threats that didn't conform to any known weapon parameters. But as Catalina banked hard left, pulling G-forces that reminded her why she wasn't supposed to be flying, she realized that her pursuers weren't trying to shoot her down. They were herding her, guiding her flight path with the precision of pilots who knew exactly where they wanted her to go. Control, Nightingale, these aren't conventional aircraft. Their flight characteristics suggest autonomous operation, possibly AI-controlled. She grunted against the G-forces as she rolled inverted, trying to break the formation that seemed determined to escort her to an unknown destination. I'm beginning to think this entire reconnaissance mission was planned. Someone wanted us to see what we saw. The realization hit Ramstein control like a tactical nuclear weapon. If the Russians had deliberately exposed their advanced capabilities, if they'd wanted NATO to discover their biological warfare preparations, then Operation Blackout wasn't a communications failure. It was the opening move in a much larger game. And somehow, a flight surgeon who wasn't supposed to fly had become the key piece on a chessboard. None of them had realized they were playing on. Webb's voice cut through the static with command authority that brooked no argument. Nightingale, abort reconnaissance. Return to base immediately via alternate route Charlie. Do not allow those aircraft to dictate your flight path. But as Catalina attempted to break away from her mysterious escorts, she discovered something that changed everything. The F-35's navigation system had been subtly compromised. Her planned return route to Ramstein had been altered, the changes so sophisticated that they'd integrated seamlessly with the jet's flight management computer. Someone had been inside their most secure systems, and they'd been there long enough to prepare for exactly this scenario. The nurse who wasn't supposed to fly found herself at the center of a technological chess match that would determine whether humanity's future belonged to humans or to the machines they'd created to protect themselves. Above the clouds at 35,000 feet, the game had only just begun. Catalina's hands moved across the F-35's controls with surgical precision, her medical training manifesting in ways she'd never expected. The same steady fingers that had performed emergency tracheotomies in field hospitals now danced across flight controls, reading the aircraft's vital signs through her fingertips. The jet's computers were compromised, but they weren't corrupted. Someone had improved them, enhanced their capabilities in ways that suggested an understanding of the F-35 systems that exceeded even Lockheed Martin's engineering specifications. Control Nightingale. My navigation system shows routing I didn't program. Someone has been inside our networks longer than we thought. She paused, studying the altered flight path with the analytical mind that had made her one of the Air Force's most respected flight surgeons. But here's the thing. Whoever did this isn't trying to crash me. They're trying to show me something. Webb's voice carried the strain of a commander watching his carefully ordered world dissolve into chaos. Negative, Nightingale. Do not deviate from standard return protocol. Use manual navigation if necessary. But as Catalina attempted to override the compromised navigation system, the mysterious escort aircraft moved closer, their formation tightening with mechanical precision. Through her helmet's advanced display system, she could see details that made her question everything she thought she knew about military aviation. The aircraft weren't just autonomous, they were adaptive, their surface configurations changing in real time to optimize aerodynamic performance. More disturbing still, they seemed to be studying her, their sensor arrays focused not on her aircraft but on her. Control, I think they're scanning me, not the jet, me. Biometric analysis, possibly psychological profiling. Her voice remained steady despite the surreal nature of her situation. It's like they're trying to understand why I'm here. In the Ramstein Intelligence Center, Major Santos was coordinating with cyber warfare specialists who were painting an increasingly disturbing picture. The network intrusion wasn't Russian. The signatures were wrong. The methodologies too advanced. Someone or something had been living inside NATO's most secure systems for months, possibly years, observing and learning with patience that suggested non-human intelligence. Nightingale, we're detecting massive data transfers from your aircraft, Santos transmitted. Whatever's happening up there, it's changing our understanding of the threat we're facing. Catalina felt the F-35 respond to inputs she wasn't making. The jet's flight path, adjusting with microcorrections that suggested the aircraft itself was participating in some kind of negotiation with her escorts. But rather than feeling violated by the loss of control, she found herself impressed by the elegance of the solution. Her compromised navigation system wasn't taking her away from safety. It was guiding her toward a rendezvous that someone had determined was necessary. "Control, I'm going to make a decision that's either brilliant or catastrophic," she transmitted, her voice carrying the calm authority she'd learned during medical emergencies. "I'm going to trust the navigation system. Something tells me that whoever is behind this has invested too much effort in keeping me alive to kill me now." Webb's response was immediate and harsh. "Negative, Nightingale. You will return to base immediately using manual navigation. That is a direct order." But Catalina was already following the altered flight path, her escorts maintaining perfect formation as they guided her toward coordinates that didn't appear on any chart. As they flew deeper into German airspace, she began to understand that the biological warfare preparations she'd observed weren't the real revelation. They were a distraction, designed to focus NATO attention on conventional threats, while something far more significant unfolded in the digital shadows. "Colonel," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the secure channel with the weight of terrible understanding, "I don't think we're dealing with Russian technology. I think we're dealing with something that's been watching us, learning from us, preparing for this moment since before any of us realized there was a game being played." The F-35's displays flickered, and for a moment Catalina saw through her aircraft's sensors with clarity that transcended human perception. The escort aircraft weren't just advanced, they were alive in ways that defied conventional understanding. Their movements showed creativity, intuition, even what might have been curiosity about the woman who'd somehow become central to a first contact scenario that no one had seen coming. As they approached their mysterious destination, Catalina realized that her role as a flight surgeon might have been more preparation than career choice. Someone or something had been evaluating humanity's representatives, and they'd chosen a healer rather than a warrior to serve as their first point of contact. The sky ahead shimmered with possibilities that would either elevate human civilization or reveal its obsolescence. The rendezvous point materialized through the clouds like something from a fever dream, a perfectly circular clearing in the Bavarian forest, unmarked by any human construction, yet obviously artificial in its geometric precision. As Catalina's F-35 descended under the guidance of her mysterious escorts, she found herself applying diagnostic techniques she'd learned in medical school to analyze what defied conventional explanation. "Control, Nightingale. I'm approaching what appears to be a landing zone of unknown origin. The thermal signatures suggest advanced materials, possibly metamaterial construction." Her voice carried professional detachment even as her heart raced with the implications of what she was seeing. "Requesting permission to investigate." Webb's response crackled through static that seemed to be increasing as she descended. "Negative, Nightingale. You will maintain altitude and await further instructions." But the F-35 systems had other ideas. The jet's landing gear extended without her input, its approach systems activating with the calm efficiency of a machine that knew exactly what it was supposed to do. As Catalina felt control slipping away from her, she realized that she'd never really been in control of this mission. The F-35 had chosen her as much as she'd chosen to fly it, and now both pilot and aircraft were participants in something that transcended military protocol. "Control, landing gear has deployed automatically. Aircraft systems are operating independently." She paused, studying her instruments with the analytical mind that had made her an exceptional diagnostician. "I think the jet is excited to be here." The landing was perfect, smoother than any she'd ever executed manually. As the F-35 touched down in the impossible clearing, Catalina felt the aircraft's systems shift into a configuration she'd never seen before. The jet wasn't shutting down. It was transforming, its internal architecture reorganizing itself for purposes that weren't in any technical manual. Through her canopy, she watched as her escort aircraft landed in formation around her, their shapes flowing from aerodynamic configurations into something that looked more like architectural structures than flying machines. But what captured her attention wasn't their physical transformation. It was the silence. After years of working in environments filled with the constant noise of military operations, the absolute quiet of the clearing felt like a physical presence. Control, I'm on the ground. Aircraft systems show configurations I've never seen before. It's like the jet is communicating with something. She unstrapped from her ejection seat but didn't open the canopy, her medical training making her cautious about potential biological hazards. Sir, I think we're dealing with technology that's been integrated into our systems so completely that we never noticed it was there. Static filled her headset, and for a moment she lost contact with Ramstein entirely. When the channel cleared, Webb's voice carried new urgency. Nightingale, we're showing massive electromagnetic activity in your area. Whatever you do, do not exit the aircraft without explicit authorization. But as Catalina sat in the transformed cockpit of her F-35, she realized that authorization might not be hers to give or receive. The canopy began to rise without her input, revealing air that smelled of ozone and possibilities. Around the clearing, the escort aircraft continued their metamorphosis, their surfaces rippling with patterns that reminded her of neural networks she'd studied during her medical training. A figure emerged from the nearest transformed aircraft, humanoid but clearly not human, its form suggesting biological evolution guided by technological integration. As it approached her F-35, Catalina felt her medical expertise engaging in ways she'd never expected. This wasn't an alien encounter in any conventional sense. It was a consultation with a species that had successfully merged organic intelligence with artificial systems. Control, I have visual contact with. I'm not sure what to call it. Humanoid, but clearly not human. It appears to be trying to communicate. She studied the figure with the same intensity she'd once applied to difficult diagnoses. Sir, I think we're looking at what humanity might become if we successfully integrate with our technology rather than being replaced by it. The figure stopped beside her aircraft and looked up at her with eyes that held depths of intelligence and compassion that reminded her why she'd become a healer rather than a warrior. When it spoke, its voice came not through her radio, but directly into her mind, carrying concepts that transcended language. We have been waiting for someone who understands both the preservation of life and the courage to fly. You are here because you represent the balance we sought to contact. Catalina felt tears streaming down her face as she understood that her entire career, her transition from pilot to physician, her nickname Nightingale, even her presence on this impossible mission, had been preparation for a moment that would determine humanity's future among the stars. The clearing filled with light that came from no visible source, and Catalina realized that her journey as a nurse who wasn't supposed to fly had led her to become something entirely new. Humanity's first ambassador to a civilization that had been.